Sophie woke up to the faint smell of burnt porridge and the creaking of doors from the cold morning wind. Her blonde hair was tangled, and her brown eyes, sunken from exhaustion, searched for a glimmer of light in that dirty twilight of the shelter. She stretched slowly and looked around. Old blankets covered bodies scattered across the floor like ghosts of forgotten lives. She stood up, slipped on her tattered slippers and went to the kitchen, where Ronald stirred a pot with a worn wooden spoon. "Good morning, little warrior. Did you sleep well?" he said with a tired smile. Sophie hugged him around the waist and answered in a low voice, "I slept hungry, but I dreamed of warm bread." As Ronald served small portions to the adults who were waking up, Sophie sat near the window and watched the dry leaves dancing in the courtyard. Life in the shelter was made up of small gestures and silent survival. Some of the older ones commented among themselves about the hope of finding some odd jobs, but everyone knew that day would be like so many others. Ronald walked past Sophie and placed a piece of stale bread in the palm of her hand. "It's not warm yet, but it's from the heart." She clutched the bread tightly and said, "You're the only one who remembers that children feel hunger too." Later, while Ronald organized donation bags and used clothes, Sophie helped an elderly woman fold blankets in the courtyard. The girl's hands trembled from the cold, but she kept a smile on her lips, even without her front teeth. The shelter was ugly, cramped, but it was the only place where she wasn't ignored. Ronald appeared with a bucket of water and asked for help cleaning the bathroom. Sophie ran out, her bare feet on the icy floor, but she answered laughing, "I'll clean everything, but only if you promise to tell me a story afterward." Night began to fall, and the shelter prepared for sleep. The sound of coughs, snores, and shuffling steps filled the hallways. Sophie lay down in her usual corner, covered by 2 old coats she used as a blanket. Before closing her eyes, she looked up at the perforated ceiling and whispered to herself, "If my mother is still alive, does she think of me before falling asleep?" On the other side of the shelter, Ronald turned off the lights, but his mind remained alight, thinking about how to protect that girl from the world outside. At the mansion, daylight entered through the high windows as if trying to illuminate something that was already dark inside. Harvey paced from room to room with a tense face and furrowed brow. He was a tall man with black hair and green eyes, but weariness made him look older than his actual age. He always dressed impeccably, but his expression was constantly disheveled. In the kitchen, Lucy silently washed the dishes as she had done for years. Harvey passed by her and commented without emotion, "Another day just like the others." Lucy replied without taking her eyes off the sink, "Only if you decide it will be." The portrait in the living room was the only place where Harvey's eyes lingered for more than 2 seconds. The image of his infant daughter, beside his wife, was a silent punch he took every day. He sat on the couch staring at the frame as if trying to bring someone back to life by the sheer force of his gaze. She would be as old as my pain now. Lucy entered the room slowly, drying her hands on her apron. "If you'll allow me, sir. Perhaps it would be better to stop living only in the past." Harvey abruptly stood up, ignoring her advice, and left the room with heavy steps. During the afternoon, Harvey tried to work, but didn't get past the first page of a report. His cell phone rang, but he didn't answer it. On the porch, he lit a cigarette, even though he knew Lucy hated the smell. The air inside the mansion was still, as if time itself was afraid to move forward. Lucy appeared at the door with a cup of tea. "It does no good to keep everything bottled up like that. It'll explode inside you." Harvey accepted the tea without looking at her and said, "I've already exploded, Lucy. Now I'm just picking up the pieces." As night fell, the mansion felt even emptier. Harvey was in the dining room, but the plate in front of him remained untouched. Lucy tried to start a conversation, asking about the flowers in the garden, but he didn't respond. He stood up, forcefully pushed back his chair, and went to the bookshelf. He picked up an old photo album and began silently flipping through it. She loved butterflies. Her mother used to say that butterflies carry longing on their wings. Lucy approached, sat down beside him, and gently spoke. "And you carry longing in your chest, but you're still breathing." When the clock struck the end of the day, Harvey slowly rose, put on his coat, and walked towards the door. Lucy looked at him with concern but said nothing immediately. He opened the door, paused for a second, and commented, "I'm going to have a drink. Maybe there I'll find a silence that doesn't hurt me." Lucy approached with a firm but respectful gaze. "I just hope that when you return, you still have the strength to fight against this emptiness." Harvey crossed the threshold without looking back. "The emptiness has already become a part of me." The day had barely begun when Ronald entered the shelter's dining hall with swollen eyes and shoulders, as heavy as if he were carrying the entire building on his back. Silence took over the place, even before he opened his mouth. Sophie realized something was wrong when she saw that he wasn't holding the pot as he usually did. Instead, he walked slowly to the center of the room, took a deep breath, and summoned everyone with a tired wave. "There's no breakfast today, and there may not be any food for a good while." The murmur of astonishment was almost immediate, but his voice was firm. "The sponsorship is over. The company that was helping us cut off everything yesterday. We're on our own now." Their gazes crossed in contained despair, as if everyone had been pushed into a deep, bottomless pit. Some adults stood up, adjusting their few belongings, trying to pretend they still had dignity. One man offered to look for a job. Another said he knew someone who might help. Ronald merely nodded like someone who wanted to believe. If anyone manages to get any work or food, anything helps, but it's better not to count on miracles. Sophie, sitting in a corner, clenched her fists over her knees. "I can go out and try to get donations. There are still good people out there, aren't there?" Ronald approached the girl, crouching down until he was at eye level with her. His voice was low but carried the raw truth of someone who knew the streets better than he would have liked. "You're just a child. I don't want you wandering out there alone." Sophie shook her head, determined. "But I have legs, eyes, and courage. If I come back empty-handed, at least I tried." Ronald neither said yes nor no. He merely stood up and watched her put on her slippers and tie her hair back with a worn-out elastic band. "Just promise me you'll be back before dark." Sophie's departure was silent, as if the shelter was holding its breath until the girl crossed the gate. Ronald stood there, watching the outside world swallow another piece of him. He went back inside with slow steps, gathering the adults to try to organize a new routine without food and without hope. "Let's share what we still have. And if anything is left over, we'll be grateful." The sound of voices grew lower, muffled by the uncertainty that occupied every corner of the walls. Outside, Sophie walked with small but firm steps. "Today, I become an adult, even if it's just for a few hours." Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, the morning light hit the huge windows of the mansion. The electronic gate opened slowly, creaking as if it too were tired. Harvey stumbled in, his jacket askew, his face sweaty, and his eyes red. His footsteps echoed across the marble like drunken thunderclaps amid the house's silence. Lucy rushed to him, clutching the dishcloth tightly. "Are you all right, sir? You didn't sleep at home?" He responded with a harsh laugh, tossing his keys onto the table. Sleep is a luxury for those without memories. Lucy followed him into the kitchen, speaking calmly but firmly. "You can't keep going on like this. It's not helping anything. Not yourself, nor the memory of your daughter." Harvey poured himself a glass of water and drank it so hastily that half spilled down his chin. "You want to take care of my memory too now?" He slammed the glass forcefully into the sink. "I'll take care of it my way." Lucy crossed her arms, taking a deep breath. "Your way is sinking this house. You're not the only one suffering. You're just the only one hiding." Harvey walked into the living room, removed his jacket and tossed it onto the sofa. His daughter's portrait was still there, untouched. He looked at the image as if awaiting a response. "You'd be her age if you'd stayed." His voice came out choked, dragged down by alcohol. Lucy appeared at the doorway with a cup of coffee and offered it. "Drink this. It'll help." He took the cup, sipped it, and without warning, hurled it against the floor. The sound was dull, cutting. "I said I don't need help." The maid brought her hand to her mouth, surprised by the gesture. "You don't need me either, is that it?" The silence lasted a few seconds until Harvey turned to her, his eyes red. "You're fired, Lucy. I don't need a moral lesson. I want silence in this house." Lucy stood still, motionless, trying to understand if he was serious. "You're really going to let me go after everything?" He nodded his head without looking at her. "You've said what you had to say. You can go." The woman, her eyes filled with tears, walked slowly to her room to gather her things. "You will realize that losing someone is not just a thing of the past. It can happen again, right now. Lucy passed through the room carrying a simple bag with her clothes. She stopped in front of the portrait of the girl and stared at it for a few seconds. Would she be proud of the man you've become? Harvey turned his face away, avoiding eye contact. Go away, Lucy, just go. She left through the front door without saying another word, leaving a heavy silence in the air, as if a part of the house had broken apart. Harvey sat on the living room floor, surrounded by shards of glass, and rested his face in his hands. Everyone leaves. Only the walls and the unanswered questions remain. At the shelter, Ronald was organizing the few remaining supplies on a crooked wooden shelf. He saw an elderly woman crying silently upon learning that she would not have lunch, and approached her to offer a blanket. "It's not food, but it keeps you warm." The woman hugged him and murmured, "You still try to smile, that's more than most." Ronald forced a smile and replied, "Because if I cry too, the house will fall apart completely." Outside, Sophie continued on her way amid honking horns and hurried steps. "If I can get at least one loaf of bread, it's a victory." Sophie walked along the bustling sidewalks with small steps, dodging hurried legs that didn't even notice her presence. The city was a noisy monster that swallowed glances like hers without a second thought. She extended her hand to an elegantly dressed woman rushing by, but received only an indifferent look before the purse was forcefully pulled to the other side of her body. "Miss, please, just a coin." The woman didn't even turn her face. "People look at me as if I'm the trash they throw away." She walked to the pedestrian signal and stood beside a group of men in suits. They were all conversing, laughing, and talking about numbers as if they owned the world. Sophie coughed lightly, trying to get their attention, but no one noticed. She reached out her hand again, but one of them just moved away in disgust. "Sorry to bother you, sir. I just wanted some bread." The man muttered something and crossed the street as if she were invisible. "The city is full of eyes, but none want to see me." Passing by the entrance of a station, she saw a man in uniform throwing away scraps of pastries into a black bag. She ran over there, but when she arrived, another boy appeared and took everything before she could touch it. Sophie just looked on, her stomach contracting. "I just wanted a piece. It didn't have to be the whole thing." The boy ignored her and left, chewing quickly while she walked away with eyes full of tears. "Not even the trash has room for me today." She continued walking until a small square where there were some benches and a small food cart. An old man sold pastries and served sugarcane juice, but when he saw her approaching, he turned his face away. "Sir, can I sweep here? Help. I just wanted a little food." The man pointed to a sign that read, "They did not accept beggars." Sophie stood still for a few seconds, but then lowered her head and walked away. "Even when I offer help, no one wants it. Will I disappear completely?" The hours went by and the heat increased. Sophie felt her mouth dry and her belly ached fiercely. It was late, and the restaurants had closed for the shift change. She looked towards the back of a bakery, but the trash can was already open and empty. She walked 3 more blocks and found another, but a group of people from the shelter were already rummaging through the contents. One of them recognized her and just shook his head. "There's nothing here either, little one." She lowered her face and replied, "Not even the leftovers have the will to exist anymore." She walked away again, now not knowing where to go. Her legs hurt and her flip-flops were almost falling apart. She stopped at a bus stop and leaned her head against the iron bar. She saw a man throwing a juice bottle out of an expensive car window and ran to try to catch it, but the cap was closed and there was nothing inside. She sat on the curb with her hands on her face. The world has everything, except space for me. In the distance, a large house appeared at the top of the street, her eyes fixed on that clean white wall. She got up slowly, walking to the corner to get a better look. The mansion was surrounded by high walls, but on the other side there was a metal trash can. The structure shone in the sun and seemed untouched by anyone. Sophie approached as far as she could see. No movement, no noise, just that rich silence that contrasted with the loud hunger inside her. The rich throw away food like they throw away paper. Maybe there's something in there. She ran her fingers along the gate, trying to see a chance. She stood there for long minutes, assessing every detail. She knew it was risky to go in there, but she also knew she couldn't bear another day without eating. She looked around, saw that no one was watching but still hesitated. If I jump and someone sees me, I could be taken by the police, but if I don't try, I might collapse from hunger. Her stomach growled so loudly that she had to press it with her hands. Maybe God doesn't send bread from heaven, but he showed me this trash can for a reason. On the other side of the wall, Harvey was sitting on the living room couch, now more sober, but with his head throbbing as if a bell were ringing inside him. The house had been in absolute silence since Lucy left. The shards of the glass he broke were still in the corner of the room, but he had no strength to clean it up. He rested his elbows on his knees and stared at the large portrait of his daughter hanging on the wall. You'd still be little, but you'd already have a voice. And what would you tell me now, huh? He covered his face with his hands and cried softly. Maybe you'd say I failed. With difficulty, he got up and walked over to the frame. He ran his fingers along the frame as if touching a wound. The girl's eyes seemed alive, and that destroyed him inside. Your mother used to say you had my nose, but the eyes were all hers. Harvey took a deep breath and closed his eyes, plunging into a memory that came like a whirlwind. The hospital, the crying, the news of his wife's death a few hours after giving birth. He remembered holding his daughter in his arms for the first time, so tiny she seemed to disappear into the blanket. Life gave me everything and took it all away on the same day. In the flashback, Harvey was younger, his face still unlined, his gaze full of plans. He walked the hospital corridors, cradling his daughter, trying to smile even with wet eyes. In the room, the bed was empty. The nurse was saying something, but he couldn't hear. It was all silence. Later at home, he tried to warm bottles with trembling hands. The maid at the time helped, but he refused. She was my responsibility. I had to take care of her. The image of his wife in the portrait frame followed him into every corner of the house. The flashback ended with the memory of the day his daughter disappeared. It was her first birthday. Harvey was in the garden, distracted by guests, and when he looked back, the crib was empty. No one knew how, no one saw anything. The panic, the screams, the police, the search, and nothing. Since then, time had stopped inside him. I promised I would protect you, and I failed. Back in the present, Harvey knelt on the carpet, his face to the floor. If you ever come back, I swear I'll do everything differently. Sophie was pressed against the mansion's gate, her tiny fingers gripping the cold iron bars, when she saw movement out of the corner of her eye. A woman was carrying bags, visibly emotional, dragging heavy steps toward the sidewalk. It was Lucy, leaving for the last time, and as she pushed the gate open to the street, it took longer than usual to close. The latch came loose for an instant, one of those instants that the big city swallows without mercy. Sophie widened her eyes, looked around, and the still ajar gate seemed like an invitation. Either I go in now, or I'll spend another night hungry. She ran to the gate, pressed her thin body against the metal, and with a gentle push, slid through the gap before the latch could click back into place. Her heart was beating so loudly, it seemed to echo in her ears. She looked from side to side, crouched behind a bush, and stayed there for a moment, breathing deeply. The mansion's garden was calm, too quiet for someone coming from the chaos of the street. If anyone catches me here, I'm lost. But if I don't try, I won't eat. She stood up and began to tiptoe towards the spot where she had spotted the trash can. The trash can was in the right corner of the yard, flush against the outer wall of the house. Sophie approached slowly, looking at the ground and trying to avoid making any noise with her worn flip-flops. When she bent down and opened the lid, the smell of old food rose all at once. Still, it wasn't worse than the hunger gnawing at her insides. She rummaged carefully, pulling out a bag where she found bread scraps, fruit peels, and a piece of pie that, even though it was squashed, still seemed edible. This might save me today. Or it might be my downfall. As she hurried through the trash, she heard a muffled sound coming from inside the house. She froze, crouching even lower, but the sounds continued. It was crying, an adult's cry, heavy, desperate. Sophie approached the living room window, kneeling on the ground to see without being seen. Inside, a tall man with dark hair and elegant clothes was crying in front of a huge painting. The sound of his sobs cut through the silence. He cries like someone who has lost everything, just like how I feel inside. Sophie didn't move. Something about that portrait caught her attention in a strange way. She dragged herself a few inches, carefully raising her body until her eyes reached the portrait in full view, and then she froze. The painting showed a smiling woman, and next to her, a little girl with brown eyes and blonde hair. The child's expression was sweet, almost shy. Sophie covered her mouth with her hand. That little girl's face. It was as if she were looking in a mirror. This can't be just a coincidence. That child. It's me. Her eyes filled with tears, but she shook her head, trying not to let herself get carried away. Her heart racing, she returned to the trash can. She needed to get out of there soon, but something inside her insisted on staying, on understanding. As she leaned over the trash again, the lid slipped from her hand and hit hard, making a dull thud. Sophie shrank back, holding her breath. From inside the house, quick footsteps echoed on the floor, and a gruff voice shouted angrily, "Is someone out there? Who's messing with my trash?" She stood still, not knowing what to do, her back curved, her face turned away. "He's going to kick me out. Or worse." The door burst open violently, and Harvey appeared, his face distorted, his eyes red and his forehead sweaty. Seeing the girl from behind, rummaging through the trash, he shouted even louder, "Is this it now? On top of everything, this beggar is even getting in the way of my grief." He took 2 steps forward, but before he could continue, Sophie turned around. Her brown eyes met his, and her face, dusty, reflected a confused and intense expression. "The one in the portrait. It's me." The phrase came out firmly, as if she had nothing left to lose. Silence took over everything. Harvey stopped halfway, his eyes wide open. He stood motionless, looking at her face as if seeing a ghost. The following seconds seemed like hours. He fell to his knees, hands on his face, and began to cry loudly, like a broken man who sees a forgotten hope return. "It's you. It's you. Oh God, it's her." His voice was trembling and his eyes never left her face. Sophie, in shock, merely observed, unable to understand. "Why is he crying for me? I don't know this man." Harvey dragged himself closer, but still without touching her. He stared, comparing every feature of that dirty face with the memory he had kept for so many years. You look just like your mother. Those eyes, that nose. There's no mistaking it." Sophie took a step back, still unsure. "I don't understand. I just wanted food." He raised his hand slowly, as if afraid of scaring her away. "You have a name. I never forgot it. Your name is Sophie." The girl bit her lip and whispered, "But I've always been just Sophie. I never knew I had a last name." Harvey's emotion grew, but he tried to control himself. Come inside with me. I'll explain everything. You need to eat, rest, then we'll talk." Sophie still hesitated. She was starving, exhausted, and this man seemed sincere but confused. The portrait wouldn't leave her mind. The child looked just like her. "I don't remember you, but that painting, it's as if I've already lived there." Harvey extended his hand carefully, his face wet with tears. "You don't need to remember now. You just need to know that you're my daughter, and that I'll take care of you." She looked at the house, then at his hand, and took a deep breath. Sophie took a hesitant step inside the mansion, the cold floor under her bare feet, contrasting with the sudden warmth that came from Harvey's words. He spoke non-stop, walking from one side to the other, pointing at furniture, paintings, and even an old armchair. "This is where your mother used to read her books. She liked to sit there, drinking tea and listening to classical music. You would sit on my lap and laugh when the violins made that thin sound." Sophie looked at everything in silence, trying to piece together a memory she didn't possess. Maybe he's right. But why is my heart still confused? He pulled up a chair for her and ran to the kitchen, opening the fridge as if presenting a feast. "Look, we have bread, cheese, ham, grape juice, and there's also that pie I bought yesterday." "No, was it the day before? No matter. You'll love it." Sophie sat down, shrugging her shoulders, still looking around, trying to understand how that house could have anything to do with her. "You must be starving. Sit down. Eat everything. Don't worry about etiquette. This is your home." She took a piece of bread, bit it slowly, and mumbled, "He speaks as if I had never left." Harvey sat in front of her, smiling more than he had in years. As she ate, he began to tell disconnected stories, as if he wanted to pour out years of silence all at once. Remember the tree in the backyard? I planted it the day you were born. It grew up with you. And that vase over there was a gift from your grandfather. A tough man, but when he held you in his arms, he cried like a boy. Sophie just listened, chewing slowly, unsure whether she should interrupt. He speaks as if it were all true. But what if it's just an invention? What if it's just loneliness in disguise? As she ate a slice of the pie, Harvey was already showing photo albums, pointing at people she had never seen. This one is your uncle. He lived far away but came to visit. And this lady was our neighbor. She made incredible cakes. You loved to lick the spoon. Sophie looked at the images without recognizing anything. Her mother's face was beautiful but unfamiliar. The places seemed like old movies. I don't know how to react. It's too much all at once. Harvey continued, excited, as if he had found a piece of himself. Do you still like to draw? You had talent since you were little. After eating, Sophie wiped her hands on the hem of her dress and stared at the floor. Harvey grabbed a blanket and led her to the couch. Sit here. Make yourself at home. This is your house. Your mother. She used to say you were going to change the world. She had a sparkle in her eyes since the cradle. Sophie looked at him with a distant gaze. I don't remember any of that. Will I ever remember? He slowly approached, trying to smile. Maybe you don't need to remember, just feel it. I feel it's you, my heart doesn't get that wrong. The sound of the doorbell broke the mood like a thunderbolt on a clear day. Sophie jumped on the couch, startled, while Harvey leapt up, hastily adjusting his shirt. It must be someone delivering a bill. Stay here, don't worry. He went to the door, but upon opening it he found two serious policemen with stern expressions. Good afternoon. We received a report about an unaccompanied minor at this residence. We need you to come with her. Sophie stood up and ran to the entrance, her face panicked. I didn't do anything. I was just hungry. Harvey extended his arms. She's my daughter. The taller policeman took a step forward, speaking calmly but firmly. Sir, we understand your position, but there is no record proving that relationship. Legally, she is without recognized guardianship. Harvey frowned, shaking his head. But she's my daughter. I'm telling you, look at her, look at the portrait. The other policeman pointed at Sophie. She has to come with us. Until the situation is clarified, she cannot remain here. Sophie approached, clinging to Harvey's arm. I don't want to go. I just got here. His attempt to argue was interrupted when the policeman approached and asked the girl to accompany them. Sophie didn't resist but kept looking back the whole time. Harvey tried to hold the door, saying names, dates, events. She went missing when she was 1 year old. We never knew who took her. This must be a mistake. The policeman shook his head. Nothing can be done now. She needs to be taken until the justice system defines the next steps. Sophie, with tears in her eyes, murmured, What if he really is my father? Why are you taking me away again? They left, and Harvey stood at the door, arms hanging, face in shock. When the gate closed, he stumbled back and fell onto the couch, staring at the ceiling as if expecting answers to come from there. It all seemed to have happened too fast. A reunion, a glimmer of hope, and then once again emptiness. She was here, she called me Dad, and now she's gone again. He got up, paced around the room, kicked a pillow and punched the wall hard. What do I do now? Where do I go? Who do I scream at? He walked through the kitchen, knocking a glass into the sink, and returned to the living room, where his daughter's portrait was still in the same place. The image watched him silently, like a mute accusation. Was I a fool? Did I mess up again? He walked to the window, looked at the gate where Sophie had left, and squinted to hold back despair. She needs to come back. I'll prove it. I'll scream if I have to, but she'll know who she is. The silence of the house became heavier than ever. He fell to his knees on the carpet and cried like a man who had lost his footing. The police car pulled up in front of the shelter with its lights off, but the weight of the situation was greater than any siren. Sophie got out with slow steps, still looking back as if expecting Harvey to appear from somewhere. Seeing the shelter's gate open, her heart raced. Ronald appeared running, his face filled with worry and his arms outstretched. Sophie, where have you been, girl? Never do that again. She ran to him, still confused, and let herself be embraced, feeling the familiar smell that mingled old soap and security. I I just wanted to help. But I found something much bigger than food. Ronald led her inside the shelter, thanked the officers with a quick nod and firmly closed the gate. He took the girl to one of the mattresses in the corner, sat down beside her, and held her small hands tightly. "How did you know where I was?" "What happened?" Sophie asked, still dazed. Ronald took a deep breath and calmly replied, "One of ours saw you entering that huge mansion. He said it could be dangerous. And he was right." Sophie frowned, thinking of Harvey's face, so different from what Ronald seemed to suggest. "He didn't harm me, he gave me food. He called me daughter." Ronald's expression changed slightly. His voice, previously sweet, now carried a cutting firmness. "You need to understand one thing, Sophie. Sometimes people approach with beautiful words, but inside they are dark. Very dark." Sophie looked at him in confusion. "He cried when he saw me. Said he'd been looking for me since I was a baby." Ronald pursed his lips and nodded slowly. "Of course he did. But you know what else he did? He's been accused of mistreatment, yelling at neighbors, humiliating employees. He lived isolated for years. That's not how a father acts." The girl lowered her eyes, clenching her fists. "But he seemed so sincere." He stood up and began pacing back and forth. His tone was now grave, almost accusatory. "You think a good man would let his daughter disappear without moving the world to find her? And what if he knew where you were all along and only pretended not to know?" Sophie interrupted, surprised. "But he cried for real. He told me stories. He called me by name." Ronald pointed at her, his voice firm. "A child's mind is fragile. Anyone can manipulate it with half a dozen words. You have to be very, very careful, Sophie." She pressed her face against her knees, whispering, "What if he really is my father?" Ronald crouched beside her again, touching her shoulders with his calloused hands. "Even if he was, that doesn't change what he is today. A broken, unbalanced man who lives surrounded by ghosts. You deserve someone who sees you whole, not someone who sees you as a memory." Sophie fell silent for a few seconds. Her chest was confused, as if each of Ronald's phrases was a blow against the memory of Harvey's embrace. "Maybe I'm seeing what I want to see. Maybe he's just needy." Ronald nodded, getting up. "That's the doubt you need to keep in your heart. Because trusting the wrong man can destroy you." As the night dragged on in the shelter, the dim light in the mansion's living room remained on. Harvey paced back and forth, sweating cold, his eyes glazed over on the floor. Since Sophie had been taken away, he could no longer think. The scene repeated in his head like a torturous film. He stopped in front of the armchair where she had sat and ran his hand over the fabric surface as if he could find a trace of her. "She was here. I heard her voice. She smiled. She called me Dad." He sat down forcefully and covered his face with his hands, and now she's gone. Again. In an almost involuntary movement, he looked at the coffee table where he had left the plates. Something was shining there, small, almost imperceptible. He approached, knelt in front of the object, and carefully picked it up. It was a long, thin blonde hair strand. He stood still, holding it between his fingers, as if it were pure gold. His eyes filled with tears. "This is real. You were here. It wasn't my imagination." He pressed the hair strand against his chest, rising with a new fire in his eyes. "If I can't prove it with words, then I'll prove it with science. They want proof. They'll have proof." He ran to the bedroom, opened the drawer where he kept the old documents, and pulled out a folder with records of his daughter's birth. Her name was there, as well as that of his deceased wife. With a trembling hand, he placed the hair strand inside a clean envelope, put the papers inside the folder, and rushed out the front door. "They said I need to prove it, so that's what I'm going to do, and if it's positive, I'll never lose her again." As he closed the door, the portrait on the wall seemed to watch him. "If you truly are mine, and I'll never lose you again." Harvey rushed into the hospital with hurried steps, his eyes red from crying, and his fingers gripping the folder tightly. The envelope with the strand of hair was stuck to his chest, as if it were all he had left. Upon reaching the reception, he hurriedly explained his request, his voice faltering between sentences. The receptionist looked at him strangely. "The DNA test requires the presence of the child, sir." He slammed his hand on the counter, not raising his voice but firmly. "I brought her hair. I just need to know if she's my daughter." The response was curt. Without a court order or the miner's presence, it's not allowed. He insisted for a few minutes, but all the professionals seemed to repeat the same phrase as if they were programmed machines. Frustrated, he walked away from the reception and began roaming the hallways looking for someone who would listen to him. He found a doctor leaving a room, and without thinking, he ran up to him, blocking his path. "Please, listen. It's important." The man tried to move on but stopped when he noticed the desperation in Harvey's eyes. "I have a minute. Speak." Harvey took a deep breath. "She disappeared when she was 1 year old. Yesterday she was at my house. She called me Dad. But they took her away before I could prove it." The doctor looked him up and down, visibly distrustful. "You're Harvey, aren't you? I've heard about you. They said you were a difficult man, that you scared everyone." Harvey lowered his head, clutching the folder even tighter. "I was. Maybe I still am. But it's only because I lost everything. I lost my wife. And I lost my daughter. And yesterday, I had the chance to have her back. And now they're saying I can only prove it with a piece of paper." The doctor remained silent for a few seconds, then extended his hand. "Show me what you brought." Harvey handed him the envelope, his eyes welling up. "If you can help me, sir, it's now, sorry. Or never again." They went to a private room where the doctor carefully collected the strand of hair with a pair of tweezers. He took a saliva sample from Harvey right there, filling out the paperwork quickly and discreetly. "I can't promise anything. This isn't the right path, but sometimes life demands crooked paths." Harvey nodded, trying to control his breathing. "I just want the truth, even if it destroys me." The doctor sealed the materials and looked him in the eyes. "Prepare yourself. It may not be what you expect." Harvey gripped the arm of the chair tightly. "Just tell me it was real. That's all I need." A few hours later, Harvey was called back to the room. The doctor held the report in his hands, his face serious, expressionless. "The results are here, and I'm sorry, but the test came back negative." Harvey blinked several times as if he expected to wake up. "No, there must be a mistake. She's the same, that face." The doctor approached, placing his hand on Harvey's shoulder. "Scientifically, you two have no link." Harvey took the paper from his hands, trembling. "This can't be. I saw her eyes. I felt it." The doctor merely murmured, "Sometimes pain confuses us." With the report in his hands and his body trembling, Harvey left the hospital as if he had lost his footing. Each step seemed heavier than the one before. The paper shook between his fingers, and the street wind hit his face like a cold slap. He got into his car without knowing where to go. His eyes were dry, but his chest was burning. If she's not my daughter, why did it hurt so much when they took her away? He leaned his head against the steering wheel and closed his eyes. What if this test is wrong? What if life is playing with me again? Meanwhile, at the shelter, Ronald closed the gate with more force than usual. He looked at Sophie, who was sitting on the patio bench, her gaze distant. He called her with a direct gesture and led the girl inside without smiling. "From today onwards, you're not leaving here anymore. You're forbidden from setting foot outside this shelter." Sophie stood up angrily. "You don't control me." Ronald turned abruptly. "While you're here, I do, and it's for your own good. That man could still be looking for you." She crossed her arms, eyes narrowed. "And if he's my father?" Ronald walked up to her with firm steps, stopping so close that Sophie took a step back. "It doesn't matter if he is. What matters is what he is, and he's unbalanced. You're safe here. There's nothing to discuss." Sophie clenched her fists, breathing fast. "He called me daughter with tears in his eyes. He fed me. He looked at me like no one ever has." Ronald turned his face and pointed to the stairs. "That's the problem. You're emotionally vulnerable. That's why you'll be under observation and away from any possibility of leaving." He led her to one of the back rooms where the walls were cold and the floor was rough. He put a folded blanket on the mattress and indicated that she should stay there. "I don't want any trouble. I don't want crying. I just want you to understand. This obsession will destroy you." Sophie sat on the mattress and turned her face to the wall. "He was my chance to be someone, and you locked me in a room like I'm a threat." Ronald closed the door firmly. "You're still too young to understand what's dangerous. But one day you'll thank me for this." From the other side of the door, Sophie muttered, "Or I'll spend my whole life wondering who I really was." Harvey was lying on the couch, his body tired but his eyes open in the dark, staring at the ceiling as if at any moment it might collapse on him. The entire house was plunged into silence, except for the sound of the clock marking time as if mocking him. Suddenly the phone rang, echoing through the room with unexpected urgency. He jumped up, knocking over a pillow, and answered with a hoarse voice. "Mr. Harvey, this is the doctor from the hospital. I need to speak with you urgently." He straightened up right away. "Speak. What happened?" The answer came firmly. "The first test was wrong. We redid it. And the new result confirms with 100% certainty that little girl is your daughter." The phone nearly slipped from Harvey's hand. He pressed the receiver tightly against his ear and passed his other hand over his face, feeling his breathing quicken. "Are you sure? Did you say certain?" On the other side, the voice calmly confirmed. "Yes, a sampling error in the previous test. It has already been corrected and registered. The document is ready." Harvey didn't think twice. He dropped the phone, hastily put on his shoes, grabbed his keys, and ran for the door. "She's mine. She always was. And now I'm going to bring her back." The night seemed less dark when there's a truth that lights the way. At the hospital, he was received without delay. The doctor handed him the envelope with the results and shook his hand firmly. "Go to the police, present the documents. Now you have what you need." Harvey didn't thank him with words, but with teary and resolute eyes. He left the hospital without looking sideways, got into his car and drove down the silent avenues to the police station. At every red light he repeated softly, "I knew it. I felt it. I've never been so sure of anything." The paper on the passenger seat seemed to shine brighter than the streetlights. Arriving at the police station, he entered with determined steps, ignoring the drowsiness of the staff. He went straight to the counter, placed the papers on the wood, and declared, "My daughter was taken, and here's the proof that she's mine." The officer who attended him picked up the documents and read them carefully. The expression of surprise was visible. "You're right, sir. This changes everything. We apologize for the previous mistake." Harvey nodded firmly. "Now I want her back, and I need you to come with me. She's in a shelter, on the other side of town." The officer called 2 colleagues and stood up. "Let's resolve this now." The journey to the shelter was quick, but every minute inside the police car seemed eternal for Harvey. He gazed out the window as if he could see Sophie at any moment, walking those dark streets. He gripped his fingers between his knees, as if holding the anxiety right there. The officer beside him tried to reassure him. "With this document, sir, you'll be able to initiate custody proceedings immediately," Harvey responded in a restrained voice. "I don't want proceedings. I want my daughter, and I want her with me today." The sirens weren't on, but inside him everything was screaming. Every second away from her is already too much time. When they arrived at the shelter, the gate was locked. The officers rang the bell and waited. Ronald appeared a few seconds later, wearing a thick shirt and with a tense look. As soon as his eyes met Harvey's, he paled. "What are you doing here at this hour?" The officers stepped forward, showing their badges and documents. "We've come to collect the minor who was staying here. Mr. Harvey has proof of paternity." Ronald glanced at the papers, then stared back at Harvey. "You can't just show up here in the middle of the night like you own the world." Harvey stepped forward, eyes firm and voice full of restrained anger. "You're Ronald, now I remember. You were my wife's ex, the same one who kept showing up uninvited, the same one she kicked out several times." Ronald didn't respond immediately, only crossing his arms. "That was many years ago. It has nothing to do with what's happening now." But Harvey didn't back down. "It has everything to do with it. You always wanted what was mine. And now you've stolen my daughter and hidden her in here. It was you, wasn't it? You're the one who took her that day." Ronald turned his face away. "Prove what you're saying." The officers intervened, asking them both to calm down. "Gentlemen, for now we can only file the complaint and follow legal procedure. Without evidence, we can't formally accuse anyone." Harvey took a deep breath, but his voice trembled with indignation. "This isn't just a complaint. This is a crime. A crime that took years away from me with my daughter." One of the officers wrote everything down while the other looked around. "Let's start the proceedings, but now we need to find the girl." Ronald stepped forward. "She's sleeping." "It's not time for commotion." Harvey came closer. Then tell us where she is now. Ronald crossed his arms again firmly. She's under my care. I won't hand her over just like that in the middle of the night, without a court order. The officers exchanged glances. Then one of them calmly warned, "If you don't cooperate, we'll have to search on our own." Harvey pointed his finger at Ronald's chest. "You know very well what you're doing. You're stalling. You're manipulating everything again." Ronald didn't respond. He just kept his gaze hard. "She's safe, and she'll stay that way." One of the officers was already heading into the shelter. "We'll check every room." The door to the back room was heavy and locked with an improvised interior lock. The officers had already checked all the other rooms and knew this was the only one left. One of them knocked hard and called out the girl's name. "Sophie? Are you in there? It's the police." From inside, silence. Harvey came closer and shouted with a choked voice, "It's me, my daughter. I'm here. They're going to get you out of there." One of the officers nodded his head and with a firm kick broke the lock, swinging the door open with a snap. Sophie, huddled in the corner of the room, looked up in fright. "Is it true? Is it really him?" Sophie ran to the door and fell into Harvey's arms, crying softly. He hugged her with such force that he seemed to be trying to bind the years that separated them. "Are you all right? Did he hurt you?" She shook her head, still sobbing, and pointed inside the room. "He locked me in here after we argued. He said I would never see you again. He got angry when I said I believed you." One of the officers approached with a notebook in hand. "Let's record this. I need you to tell me exactly what he said." Sophie took a deep breath. "He said you were dangerous, but I saw that he was afraid of you." While the officers took notes, Harvey took his daughter out of the room, not letting go of her hand for a second. One of the agents went out to look for Ronald outside the shelter, but a few minutes later, he returned with a tense expression. "Sir, he's no longer here. He's gone." Harvey looked around, feeling his stomach churn. "I tried to stop him, but he pushed me. When I realized it, I was already on the ground. He fled through the side where the wall is lower." The officer frowned. "So now we have attempted evasion. We need to act fast." Sophie looked around in fear. "He said he would do anything to keep me away from you." With the information noted and the shelter empty of any sign of the suspect, the officers called for reinforcements on the radio and set out in search of Ronald. Meanwhile, Harvey pulled Sophie close to him, wrapping her in his coat. "You will never be separated from me again, even if I have to face the whole world." She rested her head on his shoulder, tired but relieved. "I was afraid I'd never see you again. When they locked me up, I thought it had all been a dream." He stroked her hair, holding back tears. It was real, and now it will be forever. One of the officers suggested that Harvey take Sophie to the police station to give a statement and await further instructions. They went together to the car, and Harvey opened the door for her as if he were protecting the rarest jewel in the world. They got into the back seat and remained silent for a few minutes of the journey. Sophie held his hand tightly, looking out the window as if she still feared seeing Ronald behind a pole. "Do you think he'll come back?" Harvey responded firmly. "It doesn't matter if he tries. Now I'm with you. And no one will ever lock you up anywhere again." As father and daughter headed to the police station, the patrol car dispatched to search for Ronald circled the narrow streets of the area. The lights swept through alleys and vacant lots, and the officers conversed over the radio with other units. One of them noticed movement behind a fence and quickly pointed. "Over there! Something moved!" The car accelerated and entered a side street, where a man tried to jump over a stone wall. "It's him! Let's go!" Ronald ran but tripped in his haste and fell to the ground. The officers jumped out of the car and surrounded him, preventing any chance of another escape. "You're surrounded. Don't try anything. Stay where you are." Ronald slowly raised his hands, his face sweaty and eyes wide. One of the officers approached with handcuffs and began reciting his rights. "You are being detained on suspicion of kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, and evasion." Ronald didn't say a word. He just stared at the ground as if he already knew he would be found. The older officer looked him in the eye. "If you wanted to protect the girl, you shouldn't have hidden the truth." As he was placed in the back seat of the patrol car, Ronald finally muttered, almost in lament, "She shouldn't have been his. He didn't deserve her." The other officer coldly responded, "You don't get to decide that." On the other side of the city, Harvey and Sophie waited in the police station lobby. He sat beside her and put his arm around her, looking around as if still on high alert. "Are you okay? Want some water?" Sophie shook her head. "I just want to be with you." He gave a slight smile despite his evident weariness. "And that's exactly where you'll be." The two exchanged a silent understanding. The silence between them was different now. It wasn't one of absence, but of presence. A presence that promised not to be torn away again. The police station door burst open, and Ronald was led inside by the officers. His hands were cuffed behind his back, and his gaze fixed on the ground as if still trying to avoid the inevitable. Harvey stood next to Sophie, who squeezed his hand tightly. Seeing the man enter, Harvey took 2 steps forward, but one of the agents stretched out his arm to hold him back. "Calm down. There will be time for everything." Ronald raised his eyes, and their gazes met. Sophie held her breath. Now he'll have to tell the truth, and everyone will hear. The police led Ronald into a private room, but with the door open. Harvey and Sophie remained outside, waiting. One of the officers requested Harvey's presence in the conversation for the record. When he entered, Ronald was sitting at the table with an expression of exhaustion and defeat. Harvey crossed his arms, taking a deep breath, and then spoke. "Oh, you took everything from me. You took the only thing I had left." Ronald slowly raised his eyes. "I gave her what she wouldn't have with you." The room fell silent for a few seconds. "You didn't lose your daughter. You just didn't know how to raise her." One of the police officers asked him to explain what he was saying. Ronald let out a long sigh before starting to speak. "When his wife died, I was around. I was always there. I knew he wouldn't be able to handle it. He screamed, isolated himself, rejected help. That little girl, she couldn't grow up in that house. So, on the day of the party, I went there. I took her from the crib. No one saw." Harvey clenched his fists tightly. "You broke into my house and took my daughter?" Ronald only responded with a cold voice. "You lost her the same day you lost your wife. I just finished what life had started." The police officers took notes quickly. Sophie outside heard everything with wide eyes and short breaths. Ronald continued his account without changing his tone. "I created the shelter, not out of charity, but because it was the only way to hide her. A place where no one comes in, where no one asks about anyone. And she never left. Never. Until the day she decided she could leave without rules." One of the officers raised his eyebrows. "So you kept her hidden all these years among people with no legal ties, and you didn't register it anywhere?" Ronald shrugged. "Who cares about shelter people?" Harvey approached the table, containing the urge to shout. "You destroyed her childhood. You made me believe I was crazy. And all because you thought I didn't deserve to be a father?" Ronald finally raised his voice. "You didn't deserve it. You destroyed your family on your own. You were cold. You were harsh. She needed love." Harvey pointed to the door. "And locking up a child in a shelter is your definition of love?" Ronald looked down. "It was the only way to protect her from you." The officer interrupted. "Confession recorded. Now you'll answer for everything you did." Ronald was led to a cell in the back of the police station. Sophie entered the room shortly after, staring at the place where he had been sitting. "He used to tell me he loved me. He called me his daughter too." Harvey approached slowly. "He lied, and now everyone knows it." One of the officers called them back to the reception for a case update. "Mr. Harvey, the DNA test is valid. The confession was recorded. But the custody process requires a hearing. For now, legally, she still can't be handed over to you." Harvey shook his head, frustrated. "So what happens now?" The officer explained that, while awaiting the hearing, Sophie should continue at the shelter, as it was the only registered address for housing. "However," he said, "there is no legal restriction preventing you from staying there as well if it's mutually agreed upon." Sophie looked at Harvey hopefully. "You'll stay with me there, won't you?" He smiled, even though tired. "Don't even think I'll leave your side again." The two hugged tightly as the officers finalized the procedures. "We'll go back together, and this time by choice." The next morning, Harvey arrived at the shelter with a small truck loaded with food, clean clothes, and blankets. Some of the residents approached warily, but soon saw the sincerity in his gestures. Harvey organized the distribution, personally overseeing everything. Sophie helped him, smiling as she handed packages to her peers. You brought food for everyone? Harvey nodded. No one will go another day hungry in this place. One of the elderly residents thanked him quietly. We've never seen anything like this from an outsider, Harvey replied simply. Now, I'm not an outsider. Now, I belong. A few days passed. The forum room was silent, with bright walls and aligned chairs. Harvey held Sophie's hand as the judge flipped through the documents in front of him. There was a contained tension in the air, as if everyone present was holding their breath in anticipation of the truth. The shelter's lawyer made a final perfunctory comment, but the decision was practically sealed. The judge closed the folder, looked Harvey in the eye and stated firmly, "In light of the evidence presented, the DNA test and the recorded confession, I grant permanent custody of the minor to the biological father." Sophie squeezed his hand tightly. "Is it true? Now it's forever?" Harvey nodded, unable to contain his smile. Sophie jumped out of her chair and hugged him as if she never wanted to let go. The judge, still with a slight smile, concluded, "May justice not only rectify the mistake made, but allow you a new beginning." As they left the building, Harvey paused for a moment and looked up at the cloudy sky. "I promised I'd bring you home. And now I don't need to promise anything else, it's real." Sophie looked at him with shining eyes. "Now we're going to have a home, right?" He replied with certainty. "A home and a new story." In the days that followed, Harvey not only took Sophie home but returned to the shelter frequently. That once grey and forgotten structure began to gain color, life, and dignity. She renovated the kitchen, hired specialized help, installed heaters in the rooms, and started distributing meals every day. The residents were suspicious at first, but soon understood it wasn't charity, it was retribution. "No one will go to sleep hungry anymore, not while I have a plate of food." Sophie helped with the distribution, smiling at each person. "We've been here for so long. Now it's time to give back a little." One morning, Harvey called Lucy. Her voice was surprised and cautious. He spoke with humility. "I wasn't fair to you and I need to fix that. I want you back. Sophie needs someone like you by her side." Lucy hesitated for a few seconds, but then answered calmly, "If that girl is there. And if you've really changed, I'll come back." The next day she arrived with her battered bag, and upon seeing Sophie, she couldn't hold back her tears. "You've grown so much. And yet you still have your mother's look." Sophie hugged her affectionately. "You knew my mother, didn't you? Tell me everything." Lucy became more than an employee. She became a constant protective figure, telling stories of when Sophie was a baby, how her mother used to sing to her, how Harvey used to smile before the pain silenced him. The nights at home became filled with conversations around the table, shy laughter, and memories that filled the voids of the past. Your mother made soup every Tuesday, and you loved playing with the spoon. Sophie listened to every word, as if they were pieces of herself finally fitting together. "I thought I'd never know anything about her. Now I can feel her living inside me." Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, a dark cell received Ronald's impatient steps. He paced from one corner to the other, muttering disjointed phrases. His eyes were red and his hands trembling. One of the agents passed by the gate and heard him mumbling, "It wasn't meant to be like this. I gave everything. I created her. She was mine." The agent moved on, accustomed to those outbursts, but that day Ronald was more agitated. "He stole everything again, as always. He has everything, and I'm left with the scraps." He stopped walking for a moment, stared intently at the wall and whispered, "This isn't over yet. It's not over yet." Did you like the story of Harvey and Sophie? Then subscribe to the channel, comment on which city you are watching this beautiful story from, leave your like and check out the next one that is waiting for you here on the screen. I'll see you there.